The crisp morning air carried a hint of autumn as Eleanor Matthews stepped out of her car and onto the cobblestone pavement of one of the city's most exclusive shopping streets. The reflection in the storefront's gleaming glass windows mirrored her elegant appearance, a tailored cream-colored suit, subtle gold jewelry that whispered sophistication, and a confident stride honed over years of resilience and hard-earned success. She clutched a soft leather handbag, not merely an accessory but a symbol of her journey, one marked by struggles, triumphs, and an unwavering determination to create a legacy. Eleanor paused for a moment, looking up at the ornate sign above the door. Hamilton Jewels, timeless elegance. The shop's reputation for catering to the elite was well known. Its clientele often featured in glossy magazines and high society columns. Today was an important day for her. She was marking another milestone in her life, celebrating the success of her foundation, which she had built with the same care and devotion as her family. She wanted something meaningful, a piece of jewelry that could symbolize not just her achievements, but also the countless lives she had touched and transformed. Stepping inside, Eleanor was immediately enveloped in an atmosphere of opulence. Marble floors gleamed under the soft glow of recessed lighting, and sparkling glass cases lined the walls, showcasing diamonds, rubies, emeralds, and gold. The faint scent of vanilla and jasmine wafted through the air, lending the space a calming yet luxurious feel. A distant piano melody played softly, enhancing the store's refined ambience. Eleanor's heels clicked softly against the polished floor as she walked slowly, her eyes roaming the displays. Each piece seemed to tell a story, a legacy waiting to be passed on. The brilliance of the jewelry reminded her of her past, the sacrifices, the perseverance, and the ultimate triumphs that had shaped her into the woman she was today. While this wasn't her first visit to a high-end store, she still felt a trace of wonder, a habit from a time when places like this felt unattainable. A young salesperson greeted her briefly before moving on to assist another customer. Eleanor didn't mind. She appreciated the solitude to browse at her own pace. Her fingers lightly traced the edge of a glass display case as she admired a set of emerald drop earrings. They were stunning, but her attention was quickly drawn to another display nearby, a pair of diamond earrings with intricate vintage-style settings. Their design struck a chord, evoking memories of a similar pair she had once dreamed of owning in her youth. As Eleanor studied the earrings, a figure approached from the side. The woman wore a crisp black suit, her blonde hair pulled into a severe bun. Her expression was cool and professional, but there was an edge of impatience in her movements. Eleanor smiled politely, expecting the same warmth she had encountered in similar establishments. Instead, the woman regarded her with a barely concealed air of skepticism. "Can I help you?" she asked. Her tone clipped. Her eyes briefly scanned Eleanor's attire, lingering a moment too long on her simple leather bag before returning to meet her gaze. "Yes, thank you," Eleanor replied, maintaining her poise. "I was admiring these earrings. They're beautiful." "They are," the woman replied, her tone flat. "Quite exclusive, though. Perhaps you'd like to see something from our other collection." She gestured toward a less prominent display. Eleanor blinked, momentarily taken aback by the subtle dismissal in the woman's tone. Choosing to brush it off, she said, "I'd like to take a closer look at these." She indicated the diamond earrings. The woman hesitated, her lips tightening into a thin line. "Of course," she finally said, unlocking the case with deliberate slowness. She placed the earrings on a velvet tray, her movements brisk and lacking warmth. Eleanor bent closer to inspect the earrings, marveling at their craftsmanship. They were even more stunning up close, the diamonds catching the light as if alive. She was about to ask a question when the woman's voice interrupted her thoughts. "These pieces are quite expensive," the woman said, her words laced with an undertone that was impossible to ignore. "Not everyone finds them accessible." Eleanor straightened, her eyes meeting the woman's gaze. For a moment, she said nothing, the weight of the implied judgment hanging in the air. She knew these encounters too well, thinly veiled assumptions rooted in bias. Still, she remained composed. "I understand," Eleanor replied evenly. "I'd still like to consider them." The woman nodded stiffly but didn't hide her skepticism as Eleanor reached out to admire the earrings again. Her hand brushed the edge of the tray, causing one of the earrings to tip over. It slid off the velvet and landed on the glass surface below with a soft clink. The sound was faint, barely noticeable in the serene atmosphere of the store. But the woman reacted as though an alarm had gone off. "Careful," she snapped, her voice sharp enough to draw the attention of nearby customers. Startled, Eleanor instinctively withdrew her hand. "I'm so sorry," she said quickly, her voice calm but tinged with surprise. "I didn't mean to." "You need to be careful," the woman interrupted, her tone now icy. "These are delicate pieces, not something to be handled recklessly." Eleanor felt the heat rise in her cheeks, not from guilt, but from a growing sense of indignation. She had apologized. There was no need for this level of condescension. She wanted to walk away, to leave the store and spare herself further indignity. But a quiet resolve rooted her in place. Before she could respond, the woman's expression hardened. "Perhaps," she said, her voice lowering, "it would be better if you browsed elsewhere." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Eleanor felt the weight of them settle into her chest, a familiar sting she had encountered too many times in her life. Her mind raced, not with anger but with a deep, aching disappointment. She thought of her foundation, the lives she had uplifted, and the ideals she had fought for. And yet, here she was, reduced in an instant to a stereotype in the eyes of a stranger. Eleanor met the woman's gaze, her own steady and unflinching. "I'm here to shop," she said firmly. "The same as anyone else?" The woman opened her mouth to respond, but whatever she intended to say was lost in the arrival of another figure. A tall man in an impeccably tailored suit entered the store, his confident stride commanding attention. Eleanor turned her head, a faint smile breaking through the tension as recognition dawned. It was her son, Malcolm Matthews. Malcolm's presence shifted the energy in the room instantly. Standing over 6 feet tall, his broad shoulders and composed demeanor exuded authority. His dark eyes scanned the scene, quickly assessing the tension that hung thickly in the air. He moved with purpose toward Eleanor, his tailored suit a stark contrast to the hostile atmosphere. "Mom," Malcolm greeted warmly, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. His deep, resonant voice carried through the room. "Everything all right?" Eleanor managed a small smile, though her gaze flickered briefly to the salesperson. "I'm fine," she said softly, unwilling to escalate the situation in front of him. But Malcolm's sharp instincts didn't miss the strain in her tone or the slight flush in her cheeks. His eyes narrowed as he turned to the woman behind the counter. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, his tone calm but edged with authority. The woman hesitated, her earlier confidence faltering under Malcolm's intense gaze. "No, sir," she said quickly, her voice lacking its previous sharpness. "Your mother was just browsing." Malcolm's gaze lingered on her for a moment longer before he nodded curtly. "Good," he said simply. He turned back to Eleanor, his demeanor softening. "Find anything you like?" Eleanor hesitated, her fingers brushing the edge of the velvet tray that still held the diamond earrings. "I was looking at these," she said, her voice steady. "They caught my eye." Malcolm picked up the tray, examining the earrings with the same appreciation for detail that his mother had shown. "They're beautiful," he said, his tone warm. "Do you want them?" "I haven't decided yet," Eleanor replied, glancing at the salesperson, who was now carefully avoiding eye contact. She felt a pang of frustration. This was supposed to be a joyful moment, a celebration of her achievements. Instead, it had been tainted by an undercurrent of prejudice she had hoped to leave in her past. Malcolm seemed to sense her hesitation. "Take your time," he said, placing the tray gently back on the counter. "No rush." He stepped away briefly to answer a call, leaving Eleanor alone with the salesperson. The woman's forced politeness returned, but the hostility in her eyes was unmistakable. "Are you sure you're ready to purchase these?" she asked, her voice dripping with insincerity. "They're quite an investment." Eleanor felt her patience wearing thin. She drew herself up, her poise unshaken. "I'm well aware of their value," she replied coolly. And I don't need your commentary to make my decision. The salesperson's eyes narrowed slightly, but she said nothing. Retreating behind the counter, Eleanor let out a slow breath. Determined not to let the encounter ruin her day, she returned her attention to the earrings, reaching out once more to admire their intricate design. As she did, her hand brushed against the tray, causing one of the earrings to slide precariously close to the edge. It happened in an instant. The earring tipped over, falling to the floor with a faint clink that seemed to echo through the shop. Eleanor immediately crouched down, her movements careful as she reached for the earring. "I'm so sorry," she began, her voice steady but tinged with embarrassment. Before she could retrieve it, the salesperson's voice cut through the air like a knife. "Stop right there," she snapped. The sudden sharpness in her tone made Eleanor freeze, her hand hovering inches above the fallen earring. "Don't touch it," the woman said, her eyes blazing with a mix of disdain and accusation. She moved around the counter quickly, her heels clicking sharply against the polished floor. "You've done enough." Eleanor straightened slowly, her brow furrowing. "I don't understand." "Oh, I think you do," the woman said coldly, crossing her arms. "You thought you could just slip it into your pocket, didn't you?" The accusation was so outrageous, so completely unfounded, that it took Eleanor a moment to process what had just been said. "Excuse me," she said, her voice firm despite the disbelief coursing through her. The woman smirked, her expression smug. "People like you," she said, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper, "don't belong in places like this." The words hit Eleanor like a physical blow, cutting deeper than any insult. For a moment, the room seemed to tilt around her, the weight of countless similar experiences crashing down on her all at once. She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. Her hands trembled slightly as she clutched her hand back, trying to steady herself. "Is there a problem here?" Malcolm's voice broke through the tension. His towering frame reappeared in the doorway, his expression darkening as he took in the scene before him. His mother standing frozen in shock, the salesperson radiating smug superiority,